My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm a software engineer from Portland. 32 years old, recently divorced, and looking for a fresh start when I bought the house on Hawthorne Street in the fall of 2023. The place was a 1920s craftsman, hardwood floors, built-in bookcases, one of those clawfoot tubs you see in design magazines. The inspection came back clean except for some outdated wiring and a damp basement that needed dehumidifying. Normal stuff for a house that old. The realtor mentioned the previous owner had died. Natural causes, she said. Elderly woman, lived alone, passed in her sleep. The estate was selling it as is, which explained the price. I didn't ask questions. I should have. I moved in on a Thursday. Spent the first few days unpacking, arranging furniture, getting familiar with the quirks every old house has. The floorboards that groaned under certain steps, the bathroom faucet that took 3 full turns to shut off completely. The basement door. That door was at the end of the hallway between the kitchen and the main bedroom. Solid oak, original to the house, with an old-fashioned thumb latch instead of a doorknob. It opened inward to a set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. I went down there exactly once during my first week. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed joists, the furnace and water heater against the far wall. Boxes from the previous owner were stacked in the corner, mostly books and old kitchenware the estate hadn't bothered clearing out. It smelled like mildew and something else, something organic and sweet like rotting fruit. I decided I'd deal with it later. Seal it up, maybe turn it into storage. For now, I kept the basement door closed, except it wouldn't stay closed. The first time, I thought I'd just forgotten to latch it properly. I came home from work on day 6, and the door was standing open about a foot. I closed it, made sure the latch clicked into place, and thought nothing of it. The next morning, it was open again, wider this time, maybe 2 feet. I started testing it. I'd close the door, latch it, then stand there for a full minute watching to make sure it held. It did. But I'd come back an hour later and find it open. I checked the latch mechanism. It was solid, no looseness, no reason it should pop open on its own. I checked the door frame for warping. Nothing. The floor was level. There was no draft strong enough to push a solid oak door open against a latched mechanism. But every morning, the door was open. I started closing it before bed and putting a chair in front of it. Heavy dining chair wedged under the latch. That worked for 2 nights. On the 3rd night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to a sound. Scraping. Wood on wood, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway. I got out of bed, heart already starting to pound, and walked to my bedroom door. The hallway was dark, except for the faint glow of the streetlight through the kitchen window at the far end. The chair I'd wedged against the basement door was lying on its side in the middle of the hallway. The basement door was wide open. I stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness at the top of those stairs. I could hear the furnace humming below, the normal sounds of an old house settling. Nothing else. I walked over, picked up the chair, and looked down into the basement. My hand found the light switch on the wall, and I flipped it. The bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered on, casting weak yellow light across the concrete floor. Nothing looked different. Same boxes, same water heater, same smell. But there were footprints in the dust on the floor, leading from the bottom of the stairs to the corner where the boxes were stacked, and then back to the stairs. They weren't my footprints. Mine would have been larger, and I'd only gone down there once, weeks ago. These were smaller, narrower, and they were fresh, clear edges, no dust settling back into them yet. I closed the door. I wedged the chair back under the latch, and then I went back to my bedroom and pushed my dresser in front of my door. I didn't sleep. The next day, I called a locksmith, had them install a deadbolt on the basement door, keyed from the outside. I locked it and put the only key on my keychain. That night, I went to bed exhausted, finally feeling like I had some control over the situation. I woke up at 3:19 a.m. The scraping sound was louder this time, more insistent. I got up and walked to the hallway. The deadbolt I'd installed was lying on the floor, screws still attached, like it had been unscrewed from the inside. The basement door was open. But this time, someone was standing at the top of the stairs. I couldn't see details. The hallway was too dark, and my eyes hadn't adjusted. But I could see the silhouette, small frame, hunched forward slightly, perfectly still. My voice came out strangled. "Who are you?" The figure didn't move, didn't speak. I reached for the hallway light switch and flipped it on. Nothing. The bulb was dead, even though I'd replaced it 2 days ago. When I looked back, the figure was gone, but I could hear footsteps descending the basement stairs, slow, deliberate, each step creaking under weight. And then, from the darkness below, I heard a voice. It was quiet, papery, like someone speaking through tissue. "Come down, Marcus. I want to show you something." It knew my name. I slammed the door shut and held it there with both hands pressed against the wood. I could feel it pushing back from the other side. Not hard. Just steady pressure, like someone testing to see if I'd let go. I didn't let go. I stood there for 20 minutes, pressing my full weight against that door until the pressure stopped. When I finally stepped back, I heard the footsteps again, going back down, getting quieter, until there was nothing but the hum of the furnace. I left the next morning. Didn't pack anything except my laptop and some clothes. I called the realtor from a motel and told her I wanted out of the contract. She said I'd lose my deposit and probably face legal action. I told her I didn't care. She paused. Then she said something I'll never forget. "The previous owner didn't die in her sleep, Mr. Webb. She fell down the basement stairs and wasn't found for 3 days. The estate asked us not to disclose that. I'm sorry. I never went back to that house. I paid to have my things moved out by a service. The movers told me the basement door was open when they arrived, even though I'd locked every door and window when I left. They said they found something else, too. At the bottom of the basement stairs, a single handprint in the dust on the concrete floor, small, narrow, fresh, right next to where the previous owner's body had been found. I don't know who or what was in that basement. I don't know why it wanted me to come down, and I'm grateful I never found out." The house sold again 6 months later. I looked up the listing out of morbid curiosity. The new owners lasted 3 weeks before putting it back on the market. The basement door, according to the listing photos, was wide open. Claire and her husband David bought their house in the spring of 2024, a 2-story colonial in the historic district built in 1847, fully restored with period details intact. They were expecting their second child and needed more space. The house had 4 bedrooms, which was perfect. One of those bedrooms was the nursery. It was on the 2nd floor at the end of the hall, painted a soft yellow by the previous owners. The room had good light, original crown molding, and a large closet. Claire spent weeks getting it ready. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, those little decals of stars and moons on the walls. Her daughter Lily, who was 4 at the time, refused to go in there. "I don't like that room," Lily said when Claire tried to show her the nursery setup. "Why not, sweetie?" "The lady doesn't like me." Claire assumed it was typical childhood imagination. She asked Lily what lady she meant. "The sad lady. She sits in the chair and cries." Claire checked the room. The rocking chair was empty, of course. She told Lily there was no lady and that the room was perfectly safe. Lily didn't argue. She just wouldn't go inside. Claire was 7 months pregnant when things started happening. It began with the rocking chair. She'd walk past the nursery during the day and the chair would be moving. Not violently, just a gentle back and forth, like someone had just gotten up from it. She'd stop and watch until it came to a rest, telling herself it was the floor settling or a draft. But there were no drafts. The windows were closed and the air in that room was perfectly still. Then she started hearing sounds at night, singing. It was faint, barely audible, a woman's voice humming a lullaby. Claire would wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning and hear it coming from down the hall. She'd wake David, but by the time he was alert, the sound would stop. "You're probably dreaming," he said. "Pregnancy does weird things to your sleep." But Claire knew she wasn't dreaming. She knew what she was hearing. She started recording on her phone at night, leaving it on the dresser with the voice recorder app running while they slept. When she played it back in the morning, there was nothing. Just silence and the occasional creak of the house. At 8 months pregnant, Claire was up multiple times a night to use the bathroom. One of those nights, she passed the nursery on her way back to bed. The door was closed. She always left it open to let air circulate. She opened it. The rocking chair was moving, back and forth, slow and steady, like someone had just been sitting in it. And on the floor in front of the crib was a small pool of water. Not a leak from the ceiling, Claire checked. Not condensation. Just water, clear and cold, maybe a foot in diameter, soaking into the hardwood. She cleaned it up with towels, checked the crib, and found nothing wrong. The mattress was dry. The walls were dry. She had no explanation. The next night, it happened again. Same spot, same pool of water. David finally saw it on the third night. He was the one who found it this time, and he couldn't explain it either. He brought in a contractor to check for leaks. The contractor found nothing. No pipes in the ceiling, no moisture in the walls, no plumbing issues anywhere in the house. Could be groundwater wicking up through the floor, the contractor said, but he didn't sound convinced. I've never seen it present like this, though. Usually it's widespread, not localized. They put a dehumidifier in the room. It didn't help. Claire was 9 months pregnant, 2 weeks from her due date, when she woke up at 2:43 a.m. to the sound of the rocking chair creaking. Steady, rhythmic. Someone was sitting in it. David was asleep next to her, snoring softly. Claire got out of bed, her heart pounding, and walked down the hall. The nursery door was open. The lamp on the changing table was on, casting soft light across the room, and the rocking chair was moving. Someone was sitting in it. Claire could see the impression in the cushion, the way the chair's weight shifted with each rock, but there was no one visible. She stood in the doorway, frozen, watching the chair move back and forth. And then she heard the voice again, singing. It was coming from the chair. A woman's voice, soft and clear, singing a lullaby Claire had never heard before. The words were old-fashioned, something about angels and cradles and sleep. Claire's hand went to her belly. The baby kicked, hard, like it was responding to the song. "Who are you?" Claire whispered. The singing stopped. The chair stopped moving. For a long moment there was only silence, and then the voice spoke. "He's not yours." Claire felt ice flood her veins. "What?" "He's not yours to keep." The lamp on the changing table flickered. The pool of water reappeared on the floor, spreading wider this time, soaking the rug under the crib. Claire backed out of the room and slammed the door. She woke David, sobbing, and told him everything. They called a priest the next morning. Father Gregory came that afternoon. He was an older man, mid-60s, from the local Episcopal church. He listened to Claire's story without interrupting, then walked through the house with them, paying special attention to the nursery. He stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the rocking chair. "There was a child," he said finally. "A long time ago, something happened to him." "How do you know?" David asked. "I can feel it. This room holds grief. Deep grief." Father Gregory performed a blessing. He walked through the nursery with holy water, reciting prayers, asking for peace for any spirits that remained. When he finished, the room felt different. Lighter, somehow. Less oppressive. "That should help," he said. "But I need to tell you something. If this presence was a mother who lost a child, she may not leave willingly. Grief like that doesn't let go easily." Claire went into labor 2 days later. Her son, Owen, was born healthy. 8 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect APGAR scores. They brought him home 3 days later, exhausted and grateful. That first night, Claire put Owen in the crib in the nursery. The room had been quiet since the blessing. No rocking chair, no singing, no water. She thought maybe it was finally over. She woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of the baby monitor crackling, static at first, then breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone crying and trying to hold it in. Claire grabbed the monitor and ran down the hall. The nursery door was open, the lamp was on, and the rocking chair was moving again. But this time, Claire could see her. A woman in a long white nightgown, soaked through, water dripping onto the floor. Her hair was dark and wet, plastered to her face. She was hunched forward in the chair, rocking slowly, holding something in her arms. A bundle of blankets. Claire's voice came out as a whisper. "Where's my baby?" The woman looked up. Her face was gray, lips blue, eyes sunken and dark. She looked like she'd been underwater for days. She held out the bundle in her arms. It wasn't blankets. It was a baby. Still, blue, lifeless. "He's mine," the woman said, her voice thick and gurgling. "He was always mine," Claire screamed. "David was there in seconds. He saw the woman too. He told me later he'd never forget her face, the way her eyes looked through him rather than at him." David rushed to the crib. Owen was there, sleeping peacefully, completely fine. When Claire looked back at the rocking chair, the woman was gone. But the floor was soaked, puddles of water everywhere, dripping from the chair, spreading across the hardwood. They moved out the next day, stayed with Claire's parents while they found a new place. They never spent another night in that house. Before they sold it, Claire did some research. She found a record in the county archives from 189. A woman named Catherine Marsh had lived in the house with her husband and infant son. The son had drowned in a wash basin in the upstairs nursery while Catherine had stepped away for just a moment. She'd found him too late. Catherine had fallen into a deep depression after the death. 6 months later, she drowned herself in the river behind the house. Her body was found 3 days later. The room Claire had turned into a nursery was the same room where Catherine's son had died, and Catherine had never left. Claire's son is 2 years old now, healthy and happy. They live in a new house, a modern build with no history. But Claire told me she still has nightmares about that night, about the woman in the rocking chair holding a dead child, insisting he was hers. And sometimes, late at night, when Owen cries in his room, Claire swears she can hear it, that old lullaby, the one Catherine used to sing. The house was a mid-century modern, built in 1965, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. The previous owner had been an art collector, and the house was full of interesting pieces left behind in the estate sale. Jordan bought most of the furniture as part of the purchase. It fit the aesthetic of the house perfectly. That included the mirror in the master bedroom. It was a stunning piece, 7 feet tall, ornate gilt frame, clearly antique. It was mounted on the wall opposite the bed, positioned so you'd see yourself the moment you woke up. Jordan loved it at first. It made the room feel bigger, more elegant. The first week, everything was normal. The second week, Jordan started noticing small things. The reflection in the mirror would sometimes seem delayed. Jordan would turn their head and the reflection would follow a half-second later, like lag on a video call. It was subtle enough that Jordan wrote it off as tiredness, tricks of the light. But it kept happening. Jordan started testing it, moving quickly, watching the reflection, and yes, there it was. A tiny delay, barely noticeable, but consistent. Then, Jordan started seeing things in the background of the reflection that shouldn't be there. A shadow in the doorway when no one was home. A flicker of movement in the corner of the room. Once, Jordan could have sworn they saw a figure standing at the foot of the bed, but when they turned around, nothing was there. Only in the mirror. Jordan covered the mirror with a sheet. Problem solved, or so they thought. That night, Jordan woke up at 4 a.m. to a sound. Tearing fabric. The sheet covering the mirror had been ripped down the middle and was lying on the floor in 2 pieces. The mirror was exposed again, reflecting the dark bedroom. And in the reflection, Jordan could see themselves in bed. But the reflection wasn't sleeping. It was sitting up, staring directly at the real Jordan. Jordan sat up slowly, heart hammering. The reflection didn't move. It just kept staring, head tilted slightly like it was curious. Jordan got out of bed and walked toward the mirror. The reflection stayed seated on the bed. They were no longer synchronized. Jordan reached out and touched the glass. It was ice cold, so cold it burned. Jordan jerked their hand back, and that's when the reflection smiled. Not Jordan's smile. Something else. Too wide, too many teeth. Jordan ran out of the room and didn't go back in until morning. In the daylight, everything seemed normal. The mirror reflected exactly what it should. Jordan looked at their own face, haggard and exhausted, and saw nothing unusual. But Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from inside the glass. Jordan called a friend who dealt in antiques, described the mirror, and sent photos. The friend did some research and called back 2 days later. "That mirror has a history," she said. "I found records of it being sold at an estate auction in New Orleans in 1923. It originally belonged to a woman named Evelyn Cartwright. She was obsessed with spiritualism, held seances in her home. Apparently, she believed mirrors were doorways to the other side." "What happened to her?" Jordan asked. "She disappeared, just vanished one night. They found her house empty, everything in place, but she was gone. No body, no sign of struggle. Just gone. And the mirror. It's been sold 12 times since then. Every owner gets rid of it within a year. No one keeps it long. Jordan should have gotten rid of it immediately, but something stopped them. A weird compulsion, like the mirror wanted to stay. That night, Jordan woke up and the reflection was out of bed again. This time, it was standing at the foot of the real Jordan's bed, staring down. Jordan could see every detail in the mirror. The reflection's face, exactly like Jordan's, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the expression too flat. Jordan tried to move and couldn't. Sleep paralysis, maybe. But Jordan could feel the weight of the reflection's gaze, could feel it leaning closer. And then the reflection reached out, its hand pressed against the inside of the glass, fingers splayed, pushing. The glass rippled like water. The hand started to come through. Jordan thrashed, finally breaking whatever was holding them, and rolled out of bed. They hit the floor hard, scrambled to their feet and ran. They grabbed their keys and phone and left the house in their pajamas. Jordan called a priest, a medium, anyone who might help. The priest wouldn't come, said he didn't deal with objects of spiritual contamination. The medium agreed to visit, but insisted on a fee and wouldn't come alone. Before any of them could help, Jordan made a decision. They went back to the house in broad daylight, walked into the master bedroom, and took the mirror off the wall. It was heavier than it should have been, like the frame was full of lead. Jordan carried it outside, put it in the back of their truck, and drove to the city dump. They paid the fee, watched the workers take the mirror, and watched them throw it into the crusher. The glass shattered, the frame splintered. Jordan felt a release, like a pressure valve opening in their chest. But that night, back at the house, Jordan walked into the master bedroom and stopped. There was a mark on the wall where the mirror had hung, a dark stain shaped like a handprint. It hadn't been there before. Jordan tried to clean it. The stain wouldn't come off. They painted over it. The handprint bled through the paint overnight. Jordan moved out a week later. Before they left, they did one final walkthrough. When they passed the master bedroom, they saw it. The handprint on the wall had changed. Now it looked like it was pushing out from inside the wall, fingers stretching the surface like plastic wrap. Jordan sold the house as is, disclosed nothing. The new owners didn't last 6 months. Jordan heard through the grapevine that they'd gutted the master bedroom, ripped out the drywall, trying to get rid of the stain. They found something behind the wall, a second mirror, identical to the one Jordan had destroyed, and when they pulled it out, they could see something moving in the reflection, something that looked like Jordan. 3 stories down, 3 more to go. If you're still watching, you're braver than most. Or maybe you just like the feeling of dread settling into your chest, the way these stories make you look twice at the dark corners of your own home. Let's keep going. This one comes from Rebecca, a 29-year-old paralegal from Chicago. Rebecca was living alone for the first time in her life when she bought a small 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood near Lincoln Park in the winter of 2023. The house had been a rental property for years before being sold. The landlord had died, and the estate liquidated everything, including the house. Rebecca got it for a steal. The house was empty when she moved in. Completely empty. No furniture, no personal items, freshly painted walls and cleaned carpets. It looked sterile, which Rebecca liked, a blank slate. She moved her things in over a weekend, arranged her furniture, hung pictures, made it hers. Everything was fine for the first month. Then she started noticing things were being moved. Small things at first. A coffee mug she'd left on the kitchen counter would be in the sink in the morning. A book she'd been reading on the couch would be on the bookshelf when she came home from work. Rebecca assumed she was just forgetful, working long hours, stressed, not paying attention. But then it escalated. She'd come home and find the furniture rearranged, not drastically, but noticeably. The couch pushed a few inches to the left. The coffee table rotated 45 degrees. The armchair in the corner moved closer to the window. Rebecca started taking photos of her living room before she left for work, then comparing them when she got home. The furniture was definitely being moved. She checked the locks, secure. She checked the windows, locked. No signs of forced entry. No one had a key except her. She installed a security camera in the living room, one of those cheap ones that streams to your phone. The next day at work, she checked the feed. 11:47 a.m. The living room was empty and still. 1:32 p.m. The couch moved, just slid across the floor about 6 inches like someone had pushed it. No one was visible in the frame. Rebecca watched the footage over and over. There was no explanation. The couch just moved on its own. She called a friend, showed her the video. Her friend suggested it might be an earthquake or vibrations from nearby construction, but there was no construction. And Chicago isn't exactly earthquake country. Rebecca set up a second camera in the kitchen. That night, she stayed up late reviewing footage from both cameras. 3:14 a.m., the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened, slowly, like someone was being careful not to make noise. It stayed open for 30 seconds. Then it closed. Rebecca felt her skin crawl. She checked the timestamp, 3:14 a.m. She'd been asleep. She went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Someone had taken a bite out of the leftover pizza she'd saved from dinner. One bite, clean and deliberate, from the center of a slice. Rebecca didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next evening, she came home to find a note on her kitchen table. It was written in pencil on a torn piece of notebook paper, the handwriting shaky but legible. "You don't belong here." Rebecca called the police. They came, took the note, checked the house, found no signs of forced entry. They suggested she change her locks and consider a security system. They filed a report and left. Rebecca changed the locks that night, installed a deadbolt, checked every window twice. The next morning, there was another note. "This is my house." Rebecca called a locksmith to confirm no one else had a key. The locksmith assured her the new locks were secure, top of the line, impossible to pick without specialized tools. That night, Rebecca stayed awake, sitting in the living room with a baseball bat, watching the cameras on her phone. At 2:56 a.m., the kitchen camera picked up movement. A shadow passed in front of the lens, then another. Then the camera went dark. Rebecca ran to the kitchen, flipping on every light. No one was there, but the camera had been unplugged. The cord was lying on the floor. Rebecca didn't go back to sleep. She sat on the couch until sunrise, gripping the bat, watching the empty rooms. When morning came, she found another note on the kitchen table. "I was here first." Rebecca did some research. She contacted the estate that had sold the house and asked about the previous tenants. The estate lawyer was reluctant to share information, but after Rebecca threatened legal action, he sent her records. The last tenant before the house was sold was a man named Leonard Pritchard. He'd rented the house for 11 years, paid rent on time every month, never caused problems. When the landlord died and the estate took over, they'd tried to contact Leonard to inform him the house was being sold. He didn't respond. When they finally sent someone to check, they found the house empty. No Leonard, no forwarding address. His belongings were gone, but his rent was paid through the end of the month. Rebecca asked if Leonard had died. The lawyer said they didn't know. He'd simply vanished. Rebecca tried to find records of Leonard Pritchard. No death certificate, no social media, no forwarding address with the post office. It was like he'd never existed, except he had. And according to the notes, he still thought the house was his. Rebecca decided to leave. She started packing, planning to stay with a friend until she could figure out what to do with the house. That night, as she was loading boxes into her car, she heard a sound from inside the house. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, walking from the bedroom to the living room. Rebecca froze. She'd locked the door. She'd checked every room before coming outside. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, muffled and distant, like it was coming from another room. "Why are you still here?" Rebecca didn't go back inside. She got in her car and drove away, leaving half her belongings behind. She never went back. She hired someone to pack up the rest of her things. The movers told her the house was a mess when they arrived. Furniture overturned, cabinets open, belongings scattered, everywhere, like someone had been searching for something. And in the bedroom, written on the wall in what looked like pencil, were the words, "She's gone. I can stay." Rebecca sold the house within 2 months, taking a loss. She didn't disclose what had happened. The new owners lasted 3 weeks before moving out. They said they heard footsteps at night, found notes, saw furniture move, and once, the wife swore she saw a man standing in the kitchen at 3 a.m. Older, thin, wearing a cardigan and slippers. When she turned on the light, he was gone, but his slippers were still there. on the floor, exactly where he'd been standing. This account comes from a man named Eric Tan, 42, a civil engineer from Seattle. Eric is methodical, logical, the kind of person who doesn't believe in anything he can't measure or explain. He bought a house in Ballard in the summer of 2023. A 1930s Tudor, charming and solid, with good bones and a massive backyard. The inspection was thorough, no red flags. Eric lived alone, quiet life. He worked from home most days, spent his evenings reading, cooking, watching TV. Normal, until he noticed the house was repeating things. It started small. Eric would be on a work call, talking to a client about structural load calculations, and later that evening, he'd hear his own voice, faint, muffled, coming from somewhere in the house. Load-bearing walls will need reinforced supports. His exact words from the call, repeated back in his own voice. Eric searched the house. No devices recording, no smart speakers he'd forgotten about. Just the echo of his own voice coming from the walls. It happened again the next day. He'd been on the phone with his sister, talking about their mother's upcoming birthday. That night, he heard it again. We should get her that cookbook she wanted. His voice quiet and distant, like it was coming from inside the walls. Eric started testing it. He'd say random phrases out loud when he was alone in the house, then wait. Every time, hours later, the house would repeat it back. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hours later, testing 1, 2, 3. This doesn't make any sense. Hours later, this doesn't make any sense. Eric called an audio engineer friend, described the phenomenon. His friend came over with equipment, swept the house for recording devices, checked for acoustic anomalies. Nothing. No devices, no logical explanation. Maybe you're hearing echoes from outside, his friend suggested. Someone nearby with a similar voice, sound carrying through vents. But Eric knew that wasn't it. It was his voice, exact in cadence and tone. Then the house started repeating things Eric hadn't said out loud. He'd be thinking about a work problem, running numbers in his head, and hours later, he'd hear himself speaking those thoughts. Stress calculations need revision. He hadn't said it. He'd only thought it. The house was listening to his thoughts. Eric stopped sleeping well. He'd lie in bed, trying to keep his mind blank, terrified of what the house might echo back. But the thoughts came anyway. Intrusive, anxious thoughts about failure and loneliness and whether he'd made a mistake buying this house. And late at night, he'd hear them, his own voice whispering from the walls. You're going to die alone in this house. No one will find you for days. You made a mistake coming here. Eric started sleeping with headphones on, blasting white noise, anything to drown out the whispers. But he could still hear them underneath, like they were coming from inside his own skull. He decided to leave. Just pack up and go. Rent an apartment, sell the house later. But when he tried to pack, he couldn't. Every time he put something in a box, he'd hear his own voice. You can't leave. This is your home now. Where else would you go? The words felt true. Eric found himself unpacking, putting things back, convincing himself he was overreacting. It was just a house, just old pipes and settling wood creating acoustic tricks. Except he didn't believe that anymore. One night, Eric woke up at 4:17 a.m. to the sound of a conversation. Two voices, both his, talking to each other from different parts of the house. One voice from the kitchen. Do you think he knows? Another voice from the hallway. Not yet, but he will. Kitchen. What do we do when he figures it out? Hallway. The same thing we did to the others. Eric sat up in bed, heart slamming against his ribs. Others? He grabbed his phone and searched for the house's history. What he found made his blood run cold. The house had been sold 4 times in the last 10 years. The first owner, a woman named Patricia Drummond, had lived there for 8 months before being hospitalized for a psychiatric evaluation. She told doctors the house was stealing her voice, using it against her. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The second owner, a couple named the Johnsons, lasted 6 months. They both reported hearing voices, their own voices, coming from the walls. They thought they were losing their minds. They divorced a year later. The third owner, Martin Reese, lived there alone for 4 months. He was found dead in the basement, apparent suicide. The police report noted that he'd written on the walls in marker, "Make it stop, make it stop, make it stop." Hundreds of times, covering every surface. Eric was the fourth owner. He called a real estate agent the next morning, told them he wanted to sell immediately. "I have to be honest with you," the agent said. "This property has a reputation. It's going to be hard to sell unless you price it significantly below market." "I don't care, just sell it." That night, Eric heard his own voice again. "You can't sell what you don't own." Eric looked up from his laptop. "What does that mean?" The voice came from the hallway, clearer than ever. "We've been here longer than any of you. This was our house first." Eric stood up, hands shaking. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, from every room simultaneously, a chorus of voices, all his. "We're you. We're all of you. Every word, every thought, every secret you've ever had. We live in the walls now, and we're not leaving." Eric ran. He grabbed his keys and wallet and ran out the front door in his pajamas. He stayed in a hotel that night, and the next, and the next. He never went back. He paid someone to clear out his belongings. The moving company reported that the house was unusually quiet. No ambient noise, no creaks, nothing, like it was holding its breath. But when they were loading the last box into their truck, they all heard it. A voice from inside the house, speaking clearly through the open door. Eric's voice. "Tell him we'll be waiting." The house sold 6 months later to an investor who planned to flip it. The investor hired a crew to do renovations. 3 days into the job, the entire crew quit. They said they heard voices constantly, their own voices, coming from the walls, saying things they'd never said, revealing thoughts they'd never spoken out loud. One of the workers, a man named Cade Smith, told the investor he heard himself confessing to an affair he'd been hiding from his wife. He'd never told anyone about it. But the house knew. The house is still for sale. It's been on the market for over a year now. The price keeps dropping. Eric got a new place across town, a modern apartment building, concrete and steel, nothing that could carry echoes. But sometimes, late at night, when he's alone and the city is quiet, he hears it. His own voice, faint and distant, whispering things he's thinking but hasn't said. And he wonders if maybe he brought something with him when he left, or if maybe the house isn't done with him yet. The final story comes from a woman named Gabriella Williams, 33 years old, a museum curator from New Orleans. Gabriella specializes in historical preservation, photography archives, material culture. She's trained to look at objects and see their stories, which made what happened in her house all the more disturbing. Gabriella bought a shotgun-style house in the Treme neighborhood in early 2024. It was built in 1891, had survived hurricanes and floods, and was on the historic register. The previous owner had been an elderly woman named Josephine Arsenault, who'd lived there for 60 years before passing away at 94. The estate sale included most of the furniture and some personal effects. Gabriella bought several pieces, including a collection of framed photographs that had been hanging in the hallway. The photographs were beautiful, black and white, dating from the 1920s through the 1950s, showing the same family across generations. A young couple with 2 children, the children growing up, eventually their own children, weddings, birthdays, everyday moments captured on film. Gabriella loved them. They gave the house character, a sense of continuity with its past. She hung them in the same hallway where Josephine had kept them. The first week, nothing unusual happened. The second week, Gabriella started noticing changes in the photographs, subtle things. A woman in one photo wearing a different necklace than Gabriella remembered, a child in another photo standing in a different position. Gabriella assumed her memory was faulty. She'd looked at dozens of historical photographs every day at work, details blurred together. But then she noticed something impossible to dismiss. One of the photographs showed a family gathering, maybe 8 people standing on the front porch of what looked like the same house Gabriella now lived in. The photo was dated 1934, based on the clothing and styling. In the background, barely visible through the front door, was a figure standing inside the house. Gabriella had looked at this photograph a dozen times when she bought it. She was certain that figure hadn't been there before. She took the photo down and examined it closely under good light. The figure was a woman in a dark dress, standing in the hallway, half in shadow. Gabriella could just make out her face. It was Josephine Arsenault. But Josephine would have been an infant in 1934. She couldn't have been the woman in the photograph. Gabriella checked the other photographs. In 3 of them, she found the same figure, always in the background, always partially obscured, but clearly the same woman. Josephine, appearing in photographs taken decades before she was born. Gabriella's professional training told her this was impossible. Photographs don't change. They're fixed moments in time, chemical reactions on paper or film. But she couldn't deny what she was seeing. That night, she had a dream. She was standing in her hallway, looking at the EED photographs. In the dream, the people in the photos were moving. Subtle movements, a head turning, a hand lifting, eyes shifting to look directly at her. And then one of them spoke. An older man in a 3-piece suit standing in a photo dated 1947. "She's been waiting for you." Gabriella woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat. She went to the hallway and turned on the light. The photographs looked normal, static, just old family photos. But as she turned to go back to bed, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. She looked back. In one of the photographs, a birthday party scene from 1952, a little girl in the background had moved. Her head had turned, and now she was looking directly at the camera, directly at Gabriella. Gabriella grabbed the photograph off the wall and carried it to the kitchen, setting it on the table under the bright overhead light. She stared at it for 5 minutes, barely blinking, waiting to see if it would move again. It didn't. But when she finally looked away and then looked back, the little girl's position had changed again. Now she was closer to the camera, like she'd walked forward while Gabriella wasn't looking. Gabriella put the photograph face down on the table and backed away. She called a colleague at the museum, a photography expert, and described what she was seeing. "Photographs can't change, Gabby," her colleague said, patient but concerned. "I think you need to get some sleep. You sound exhausted." "I know what I'm seeing." "Then bring them in. Let me examine them. We'll figure out what's happening." Gabriella agreed. She'd bring the photographs to the museum in the morning. But when she went back to the kitchen, the photograph wasn't face down on the table anymore. It was hanging back in the hallway. In its original position, Gabriella hadn't touched it. She checked all the photographs. They were all back on the wall, perfectly straight, like they'd never been moved. And in the birthday party photo, the little girl was gone, completely absent from the frame, even though Gabriella clearly remembered her being there. Gabriella didn't sleep that night. She sat in her living room with all the lights on, avoiding the hallway. At 4:47 a.m., she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. She forced herself to look. A woman was standing in the hallway, facing the photographs. It was Josephine, exactly as she'd looked in the photos Gabriella had seen in the estate paperwork, elderly, small frame, wearing a house dress. Josephine reached up and straightened one of the frames. Then she turned to look at Gabriella. "They want you in the photographs," Josephine said, her voice soft and papery. "What?" "They've been waiting for someone new, someone to complete the family." Gabriella stood up, her voice shaking. "You're dead. You're not real." Josephine smiled sadly. "I lived in this house for 60 years. I took care of them. And when I died, they kept me. Now I'm in the photographs with them. Forever." She gestured to one of the frames. Gabriella looked. It was a photo she'd seen before, a holiday dinner from the 1940s. But now there was a new figure at the table. Josephine, young and smiling, sitting among people who'd been dead long before she was born. "They're lonely," Josephine said. "They need new people. The house brings them. That's how it works." "I'm leaving," Gabriella said. "Right now." "You can leave," Josephine said. "But they'll follow you. They're attached to you now. You looked at them. You brought them into your home, into your head." Gabriella ran. She grabbed her keys and left, driving to a friend's apartment across town. She stayed there for a week, trying to process what had happened. She hired someone to pack up the house and remove all the photographs. She gave explicit instructions: burn them, destroy them, don't keep them. The service she hired confirmed they'd removed and destroyed all the photographs. Gabriella sold the house 3 weeks later, never going back inside. She moved to Baton Rouge, got a new apartment, started over. She thought she was safe. until she unpacked her boxes and found one of the photographs mixed in with her belongings, the birthday party photo. And in the background, barely visible in the doorway, was Gabriella herself, wearing the same clothes she'd worn the night she ran from the house. She burned the photograph immediately, watching it curl and blacken in her kitchen sink. But the next morning, she found another one, a family gathering from 1956. And there she was again, standing in the back row, smiling like she'd always been part of the family. Gabriella stopped unpacking. She went to a copy shop and made prints of her driver's license, her work ID, anything with her photo on it. In every image, if she looked closely enough, she could see them. The family from the photographs standing just behind her, just out of focus. Always there, always watching. She contacted a folklorist who specialized in Louisiana supernatural traditions. The folklorist listened to her story and was quiet for a long time. Some families, she finally said, don't end when people die. They're bound to places, to objects, to the idea of family itself. If they've claimed you, removing the physical photographs won't help. They're already in your image now, in every reflection, every picture, every mirror. How do I make it stop? You don't. You either accept them or what? Or you join them completely. Give yourself over. Become part of the family portrait forever. Gabriella refused. She kept living, kept working, kept existing. But she stopped looking at photographs, stopped taking pictures, covered every mirror in her apartment. She stopped video calls at work, stopped going places with security cameras when she could help it, because every time she saw her own image, they were there. The family, standing behind her, around her, reaching for her, waiting for her to finally stop fighting, waiting for her to take her place in the photograph. Last month, Gabriella's sister called me. She'd found my contact information in Gabriella's apartment after Gabriella disappeared. They'd found her car in a parking garage near the French Quarter. Her phone and wallet were inside, but Gabriella was gone. The police investigated but found nothing. No witnesses, no evidence of foul play. But her sister sent me something Gabriella had left behind. A photograph. It's a family gathering from 1962, based on the styling. 15 people, 3 generations, standing on the front porch of a house I recognize from Gabriella's description. And in the back row, standing between a man in a suit and a woman in a floral dress, is Gabriella. Smiling, like she'd always been there, like she'd finally found her place in the family. Her sister asked me what it meant. I didn't have an answer to give her. All I know is that the photograph is dated April 1962. 62 years before Gabriella was born. And that smile on her face? It doesn't reach her eyes. 6 stories, 6 houses, 6 people who thought they were starting over. They were wrong. Some houses aren't empty when you move in. They come with families you can't see and reflections that don't quite match. Some houses don't want owners. They want permanent residents. If you've ever heard footsteps when you were alone or found things rearranged by hands that weren't yours, tell me your story in the comments. If it's disturbing enough, I'll feature it in the next video. Check the description for links to the stories, and if you're brave enough for next week, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, before you click off, look around your room. Really look. Do you know the history of where you're sleeping tonight? Do you know who was there before you? Because the houses remember. And now that you've heard these stories, you might start noticing things in your own home. A shadow in a doorway you thought was empty. A face in a mirror you thought only reflected yourself. A lullaby in a room you thought was silent. They're patient, these houses. They have all the time in the world, waiting, watching, remembering. Leave a light on tonight. Sleep tight.